Every summer, my wife Lauren and I drive up the coast to spend a week at the same beach town. It's tradition. We rent the same house, eat at the same seafood shack, even play the same damn mini-golf course where I proposed to her 10 years ago. That little white cottage with blue shutters feels like ours, even if it belongs to someone else. The owner, Grant, is a laid-back guy in his 40s who lives nearby and drops by occasionally to fix things or mow the lawn. He's always been friendly, maybe a bit too friendly now that I think about it, but I chalked it up to small-town charm. This year, though, something felt off. Lauren was quieter, spent more time on her phone, and took longer walks on the beach alone. When I'd ask if everything was all right, she'd just smile and say she was soaking in the peace and quiet. She's an attorney, always stressed, so I didn't push. I figured she just needed the break. One evening, while she was out on one of her sunset walks, I got bored and started flipping through Netflix on my iPad. I almost didn't notice when a message popped up. It wasn't my account, it was Lauren's. I should have looked away, but curiosity got the best of me. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. When can we meet again? The contact name was just G. My stomach twisted. Grant. It had to be. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that maybe it was a friend or a coworker, but that sick feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. I took a screenshot, fingers trembling, and deleted the notification. When Lauren came back, her cheeks were pink from the wind, hair tousled, eyes bright. She kissed me on the cheek and smiled like everything was fine, like she hadn't just gotten a message that shattered my entire world. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed proof, a plan. If I was wrong, if I misunderstood, I couldn't risk blowing up my marriage over one text. So I played along. I held her hand, made her coffee in the mornings, and pretended not to notice when she'd disappear for an hour to read on the porch. That night, I waited until she fell asleep before grabbing her phone. Locked, of course. I set it back down, heart pounding so loud I was sure it'd wake her. I barely slept, every creak of the house setting me on edge, mind racing with a million questions. Was it a fling? A one-time thing? Or had this been going on for years? Morning came, and Lauren was all sunshine and smiles, humming while making breakfast. I forced myself to act normal, but I was a mess. I needed answers, and I knew where to start. That afternoon, when Lauren went out for more sunscreen, I told her I'd stay back and fix the kitchen window that was sticking. As soon as her car pulled away, I grabbed my keys and headed to the garage. If Grant was involved, he'd left some sort of trail. I just didn't realize how messy things were about to get. I wasn't sure what I was looking for as I pulled out of the driveway, hands gripping the wheel tight enough to hurt. Grant's place wasn't far. A small house at the end of a winding road, half hidden by trees. I parked a block away, my heart jackhammering in my chest. For a minute, I just sat there, knuckles white, fighting the urge to turn around and pretend I hadn't seen that message. But I needed to know. Grant's truck was parked outside, the back filled with tools and paint cans. I crept closer, hoping he wouldn't look out the window and spot me skulking around like some kind of lunatic. As I neared, voices floated from the open garage. I ducked behind a hedge, holding my breath. She'll be here tonight. Her husband doesn't suspect a thing. Grant's voice, smooth and cocky. My stomach dropped. Man, you're playing with fire. Another voice chuckled. Hope she's worth it. Oh, she is, Grant said, laughing. These married women, bored out of their minds, desperate for some excitement. They're the easiest. A chill ran down my spine. Women, plural. How many husbands had this guy played for fools? How many vacations had he ruined without them even knowing? I bit down hard, teeth grinding, as rage burned through me. This wasn't just about Lauren. This was a goddamn pattern. The voices drifted back inside. I waited, breath shallow, until I heard a door slam. Then I crept closer, phone out, snapping pictures of Grant's truck, the house, anything that might help. Proof. I needed proof. I didn't care if it made me a psycho. I wasn't losing my wife to some smooth-talking con artist without a fight. Back at the rental, Lauren was stretched out on the porch, legs bare and glistening in the sun, sunglasses hiding her eyes. My hands shook as I forced a smile and kissed her cheek, heart twisting when she leaned into it like nothing was wrong. I had to grip the kitchen counter to keep from shaking. I spent the next few days gathering intel like a damn private eye. While Lauren was out or asleep, I scoured her phone bills, her emails, anything I could get my hands on without her noticing. But the woman was a lot better at covering her tracks than I'd expected. No calls, no texts, nothing linking her to Grant except that one message. The waiting drove me insane. I could barely choke down food, hands trembling when I tried to eat. I barely slept, staring at the ceiling while Lauren's even breathing cut through the silence. Sometimes she'd roll over, draping an arm across me, and it took everything I had not to pull away. How could she touch me like that after what she'd done? Then, on the third day, I got my break. I was out on the porch, pretending to read while Lauren was in the shower. Her phone buzzed on the table beside me, and before I could stop myself, I glanced at the screen. "See you tonight, beautiful. Usual place." Gee, the words were a punch to the gut. My hands moved on autopilot, snapping a picture of the text before it vanished. That was it. The confirmation I needed. My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. I needed out. Away from her, from this nightmare. I muttered something about needing air and stumbled out the door, heart pounding like a war drum. I didn't even grab my keys, just kept walking until my legs ached and the ocean roared in my ears. Seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries harsh and mocking. I stopped at a bar down the beach, the kind with sticky floors and bartenders who didn't ask questions. The whiskey burned, but it didn't do a damn thing to drown the images playing on a loop in my mind. Lauren, tangled in someone else's sheets, laughing at me behind my back. I downed another shot, hands shaking. I don't remember how many drinks I had before a voice cut through the fog. "You look like you've seen a ghost, buddy." I glanced up, blinking blearily at the man who'd taken the stool beside me. Mid-40s, sunburned, with a voice like gravel and eyes that had seen too much. He raised a brow, mouth twitching. "Rough day." "You could say that," I muttered, throat raw. "Wife troubles?" he asked, and when I flinched, he chuckled. "Yeah, figured. Don't worry. You're not the first guy Grant's pulled this crap on." The room tilted. "What? Grant?" he repeated, eyes narrowing. "Owner of that beach house you're renting, right? Real piece of work. Heard all about him from my buddy. His wife was one of Grant's little flings last summer." He snorted. "Bastard's got a whole list of married women he's hooked." I stared at him, head spinning. This couldn't be real. One guy, maybe, but a whole list? I dragged a hand down my face, breath coming fast. "You sure?" He shrugged. "My buddy's been trying to get the word out. Hell, if you're up for it, I can give you his number. Bet he'd love to take that prick down a peg." I didn't hesitate. I took the number, fingers tight around the paper like a lifeline. As I stumbled back to the rental, mind reeling, a plan began to form. If Grant thought he could play me for a fool, he was dead wrong. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about exposing him for what he really was. And God help him when I did. I spent the next few days piecing together a plan, the kind of scheme that would either blow up in my face or take Grant down in flames. The first step was to call the guy from the bar, Mike. He picked up on the second ring, voice gruff and wary until I explained who I was. As soon as I mentioned Grant's name, though, Mike's tone shifted. "Bastard's been wrecking marriages up and down this coast for years," he growled. "About damn time someone did something about it." By the time we hung up, I had a list of other husbands who'd been screwed over by Grant and a group chat already buzzing with texts. Half of them wanted blood. The other half just wanted answers. Either way, they were in. I told Lauren I was going fishing when I left to meet them, voice steady even though my heart was pounding like a drum. She barely glanced up from her laptop, a glass of rose at her elbow and one leg draped lazily over the porch railing. I had to force myself not to slam the door. We met at a rundown bar by the docks, the kind of place that didn't ask questions or check IDs too closely. Mike was already there, nursing a beer, and a few other guys lurked at the back, all wearing the same tight, angry expressions. Introductions were quick and awkward, names muttered between clenched teeth. "Brad, whose wife had run errands every day at 5 p.m. sharp. Dave, who'd stumbled on photos of Grant on his wife's phone. And Tony, who hadn't even known about the affair until Mike reached out. The last guy, Peter, just glared into his drink, fingers flexing and fists tightening. "So," Mike said, once everyone had settled, "what's the plan?" Eyes swung to me, and I took a breath, palms damp. I hadn't planned on leading this little revolution, but here we were. "We need proof," I said, trying to sound a hell of a lot more confident than I felt. "Something concrete that ties him to all of this. Texts, photos, anything that shows he's been preying on married women." Brad snorted, taking a swig of his beer. "And what? Post it online? Guy like Grant a lawyer up faster than you can say cease and desist." "That's why we don't go to the cops," I replied, voice low. "Not yet. We make sure the right people see it first. His wife, for starters. Let her know who she's married to. Maybe the local news. Hell, maybe we find every damn husband whose life he's blown up and stage a goddamn intervention right on his lawn." That got a few dark chuckles. Peter, still glaring, grunted. "Bet he'll try to weasel out of it. Guys like that always do." "Not if we bury him in evidence," I said. "We've all got pieces of the puzzle. We put them together, we make sure there's nowhere for him to hide." They traded glances, tension easing just a bit. It wasn't much, but it was something. Mike leaned in, eyes sharp. "You're serious about this, huh?" "Dead serious." I didn't hesitate. "He came after my wife. That's personal." "Damn right," Tony muttered, slamming back his whiskey. "Count me in." One by one, they agreed, jaws clenched and eyes hard. By the time we broke for the night, we had a plan. Gather everything we could on Grant, cross-reference dates and names, and meet again in 2 days. My hands were still shaking as I drove back to the rental, adrenaline buzzing under my skin. Lauren was already asleep when I got back, one arm flung across my side of the bed, hair fanned across the pillow. I watched her for a long moment, chest tight. Even now, even knowing what I knew, I couldn't look at her without that hollow ache in my gut. I'd loved her since college, since the first awkward date at that hole-in-the-wall pizza place where she'd beaten me at darts and kissed me by the jukebox. But now, every laugh, every smile, every kiss felt like a knife between my ribs. I slid into bed beside her, careful not to touch. Her breathing was soft, steady, utterly oblivious. My mind spun, replaying every kiss and lie, the text on her phone, the smirk on Grant's face. I clenched my fists until my knuckles ached. I barely slept. By dawn, I'd already showered and dressed, nerves shot but head buzzing with plans. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when Lauren wandered in, bleary-eyed and yawning. Her lips curved when she saw me, and my gut twisted. "You're up early," she murmured, sliding her arms around my waist. The scent of lavender and hotel shampoo made my jaw clench. "Couldn't sleep?" I muttered, forcing a smile. She leaned in, lips brushing my neck, voice soft and teasing. "Maybe I can help with that." The words turned my stomach. I pulled back, feigning a smile. "Maybe later." I told Mike I'd help him with his boat today. She pouted, bottom lip caught between her teeth in that way that used to drive me insane. Now it just made me sick. "Fine," she sighed, trailing a finger down my chest. "Guess I'll just have to find some other way to entertain myself." I forced a laugh, even as my mind screamed. She sauntered off, hips swaying, and I drained my coffee, throat tight. That afternoon, while she was out getting groceries, I pulled up Grant's contact info and scrolled through his socials, jaw clenched tight. His latest post was a picture of the beach, captioned, "Another day in paradise." The comments were filled with women gushing about how lucky he was, how handsome. I nearly smashed my phone. Instead, I scrolled further, tagged photos, check-ins, anything I could find. It was buried, but it was there. A picture from a party last fall, Grant with his arm around a blonde I didn't recognize and another guy I did. Brad's wife. That was all I needed. I grabbed my keys, dialing Mike's number as I headed for the door. "It's worse than we thought," I said, voice low and tight. He's got a whole damn list. Mike cursed, long and loud. Then we bring the whole damn thing down. We agreed to meet that night, and as I hung up, hands trembling, one thought burned through the haze of rage and betrayal. This wasn't just about me or Lauren anymore. This was war. By the time I pulled up to the bar that night, my hands were still shaking, heart pounding so hard I was half sure everyone could hear it. The others were already there, huddled around a corner booth like a bunch of war generals plotting an ambush. Mike caught my eye, nodding me over. I slid into the booth, slapping a folder onto the table. Inside was everything I'd found on Grant, photos, timestamps, that text he'd sent Lauren. Proof enough to hang him out to dry if we played this right. Holy hell, Brad muttered, flipping through the pages. His face went red, eyes narrowing to slits. That's my wife's number. Yeah. I bit out, jaw clenched. And she's not the only one. Mike leaned back, fingers steepled. So we've got motive, we've got evidence. What we don't have is a way to put the bastard in a corner. Peter, who'd been silent up till now, snorted. A 2x4 to the skull sounds like a start. For a moment no one spoke. Then Tony huffed out a laugh, bitter and hollow. Tempting, he muttered. But I'd rather ruin his life, not just his face. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. I've got an idea, but it's risky. 5 pairs of eyes turned to me, brows raised. I took a breath, palms damp. We get him on camera, I said, confessing, or at least admitting enough to bury him. If he thinks he's just bragging to one of us, maybe he'll let something slip. Brad frowned. How? He's not just gonna open up to a bunch of pissed-off husbands. Not us, I said. Me. A beat of silence. Then Mike swore. That's suicide, he snapped. Guy's already got your wife hooked. You walk into that, you're asking to get burned. Maybe, I shot back. But if we get him talking, we take this to his wife, his neighbors, hell, the whole town if we have to. No way he weasels out of that. Tony grunted. Bait the trap, catch the rat. Exactly, I said, fingers drumming on the table. He thinks he's smarter than all of us. We use that. Make him slip up. They traded glances, wary but intrigued. Mike sighed, scrubbing a hand over his face. Fine, he grumbled. But we do this my way. No giro crap. We back you up, close by, in case it goes south. I agreed, heart pounding. As we hashed out the details, where, when, how, I could barely focus, thoughts spinning with a single question. What if Lauren found out? The idea of her looking at me the way I'd been looking at her, like a stranger, a liar, made my chest tighten. But it was too late to turn back now. If I didn't do this, Grant would keep ruining lives. And I wasn't about to let him add mine to the list. The next day, I played the part of the clueless husband, keeping my head down while Lauren moved around the rental, humming as she packed for a shopping trip with friends. She kissed my cheek, too sweet, too casual, and I had to grit my teeth not to pull away. I'll be back late, she murmured, lips brushing my ear. Don't wait up. I forced a smile, heart hammering. Have fun. Her heels clicked down the porch steps, each one a nail in the coffin. I watched her car disappear around the bend, jaw clenched so hard it ached. Then I grabbed the tiny mic Mike had lent me, clipped it under my shirt, and took a breath. Game time. Grant's place looked even scummier in daylight. Peeling paint, lawn overgrown, blinds half-drawn. His truck was out front, so I pulled in behind it, heart in my throat. He answered on the second knock, smirk already in place. Well, he drawled, leaning on the doorframe. Didn't expect to see you. I forced a grin, hands tucked in my pockets to hide the tremble. Yeah, about that. I shifted, glancing around like I was worried about being seen. You got a minute? His smirk widened. Sure, he chuckled, stepping aside. Always got time for a friendly chat. The living room was a mess. Beer cans, takeout boxes, a rumpled blanket on the couch. I swallowed hard, fighting down the urge to snap his neck right there. Focus. So, Grant drawled, sprawling on the couch. What's on your mind, buddy? I forced a laugh, dragging a hand through my hair. Look, I muttered, shifting on my feet. I found some texts. From you. On my wife's phone. Grant's smirk faltered, just for a second. That right? He asked, tone smooth but eyes sharper. Yeah, I grunted, playing up the awkward, bumbling act. And man, I gotta know. How'd you pull it off? I mean, she never even looked at another guy before. Thought I was losing my mind. But hell, you must be some kind of magician. For a second, nothing. Then Grant barked a laugh, slapping his knee. Magician? He snorted. Nah, just experience. Women like your wife. They're all the same. Bored. Lonely. Waiting for someone to make them feel alive again. My hands curled to fists, nails biting skin. Keep him talking. She wasn't the first, huh? I asked, voice tight. Bet you've got a whole damn list. His eyes glinted, lips curling. You could say that, he chuckled. Some of them even come back for more. Pathetic, really. Makes it too easy. The mic caught every word, my heart pounding with each syllable. But I wasn't done yet. What about their husbands? I asked, voice low. They ever catch on? Grant snorted. Nah. Dumb as bricks, the lot of them. Too busy playing golf or working late to notice. By the time they figure it out, it's too damn late. My vision blurred red. I had to grit my teeth to keep from lunging, fingers digging into my palms. But it was done. We had him. That's damn. I muttered, voice shaking for real this time. Guess I really am an idiot. Grant chuckled, clapping me on the shoulder. Hey, don't take it too hard, buddy. Some guys just ain't cut out for this game. I forced a laugh, pulling back before I broke his wrist. Yeah, guess not. Then I was out the door, legs unsteady, chest tight with rage and triumph. I kept it together until I reached the car, slamming the door and gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles cracked. Mike's voice crackled in my ear. We got it, he said, voice low and grim. Every damn word. Good. I rasped, vision swimming. Let's burn him. As I pulled away, tires spitting gravel, one thought beat with every thud of my heart. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. By the time I pulled into Mike's driveway that night, the sun was dipping behind the trees, sky streaked with blood red and bruised purple. Fitting, I thought, grimly, killing the engine. The other guys were already there, voices low and angry as I stepped into the garage, hands still trembling around the steering wheel. Mike glanced up from his laptop, eyes hard. You good? He asked. Peachy? I bit out, slamming the door. The adrenaline hadn't worn off yet, my heart still jackhammering. Even now, I could see Grant's smirk, hear that cocky laugh echoing in my ears. Did you get it? Tony asked, voice tight. Mike smirked, tapping a key. A second later, Grant's voice crackled through the speakers, smug and venomous. Women like your wife, they're all the same, bored, lonely, waiting for someone to make them feel alive again. Brad cursed, running a hand over his face. Peter's jaw clenched so tight I could see the veins in his neck. Mike's smirk widened. And there's more, he said, scrolling. Pretty much confessed to screwing half the married women on this coast. Tony's lips peeled back in a snarl. So what's the move? We dump this on Facebook, torch his life, call it a day. Tempting, I muttered, voice low. But no, that's too easy. They turned to me, brows raised. Mike crossed his arms, head tilted. You got a better idea? I took a breath, words bitter on my tongue. We start with his wife, I said. Let her know what kind of scumbag she's married to. Then we move up the chain, his neighbors, his boss, hell, even the HOA if we have to. By the time we're done, there won't be a soul in this town who doesn't know exactly what he's been up to. Brad barked a laugh, sharp and humorless. Public execution, huh? I like it. Tony snorted. Good luck getting his wife on board. Women like her don't want to believe their man's a dog, even with a video playing right in front of him. Mike smirked, tapping a file. That's why we bring receipts, he said. Photos, texts, hell, even that phone call. We make it so damn airtight she can't ignore it. I leaned in, jaw clenched. And when she's done kicking him out, we torch the rest. Every text, every recording, every photo, all of it. We nuke his whole damn life. Peter cracked his knuckles, lips twitching. Hell yeah, he muttered. For the next hour we planned it out, who would talk to who, when, where. Every detail nailed down tight. By the end, the garage smelled like sweat and rage. The air electric with the promise of vengeance. Mike slapped my shoulder, eyes glinting. You sure you're up for this? He asked. Once we pull the pin, there's no putting it back. I met his gaze, teeth bared. I've never been more sure of anything. The next day, I called in sick and waited until Lauren left for her yoga class before grabbing the files and driving to Grant's house. It took everything I had not to punch a hole through the steering wheel when I pulled up, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Grant's wife, Melissa, answered the door, eyes wide and wary. Early 40s, blonde, still in her tennis whites. She blinked at me, confused, one hand clutching the door. Can I help you? She asked, brow furrowing. I swallowed hard, words like acid. I'm here about Grant, I managed, voice tight. Can I come in? The living room was spotless, magazine covers fanned on the coffee table. Not a pillow out of place. The kind of room where you didn't dare kick your shoes off. Melissa perched on the edge of the armchair, hands twisting in her lap, eyes darting between me and the manila envelope on the table. I took a breath, palms damp. Look, I started, voice hoarse. This isn't easy to say, but you need to see this. She opened the envelope with shaking hands, eyes skimming the photos, the printed texts, the transcripts. Her breath hitched, fingers curling, white-knuckled. When she reached the transcript of Grant's little confession, her face went pale, eyes glistening. I'm sorry, he muttered, throat tight. I just thought you should know. Melissa stared at the papers, lips trembling. Then, all at once, her face crumpled. She covered her mouth with one hand, a broken sob tearing free. My gut twisted, guilt flaring even though I knew this wasn't my fault. That bastard, she choked, voice raw. All those late nights, those business trips. God, I'm so stupid. You're not. I bit out, fists clenched. He's the scumbag here, not you. Her hands shook, nails digging into her palms. She dragged in a breath, eyes narrowing, rage burning through the tears. He thinks he can just do this to me? She hissed. I'll bury him. The venom in her voice almost made me grin. I was hoping you'd say that, I said, voice low. 3 hours later, Melissa had the evidence. By dinner, she'd called every lawyer in town and her brother in the county sheriff's office. By midnight, half the town knew about Grant's little hobby. And the next morning, the real fireworks started. I was in the kitchen, coffee in hand, when Lauren's phone buzzed on the counter. She was in the shower, water pounding. So I reached for it without thinking, eyes flicking to the screen. New message from Grant. We've got a problem. Call me. Now. My stomach lurched, coffee sloshing over the rim of the mug. I took a breath, swiped to unlock. The message thread was a minefield, photos, texts, half a dozen frantic messages from Grant over the past hour. Melissa knows everything. She's called my boss. We need to talk now. I stared at the screen, heart hammering. Then Lauren's footsteps echoed down the hall, water still running. I locked the phone, setting it down with shaking hands, blood roaring in my ears. She strolled into the kitchen, towel twisted around her hair, smile soft and sleepy. Morning, she murmured, pressing a kiss to my cheek. Everything okay? I forced a grin, bile rising in my throat. Yeah, I rasped. Everything's fine. But as I watched her pour coffee, smile sweet and easy, one thought blazed in my mind, bitter and bright. Not for long. By noon, the town was buzzing. Grant's name was on everyone's lips, every phone lighting up with texts, every coffee shop and diner crackling with whispers. Even the local news had gotten wind of it. Some ambitious intern had turned a scandal at the shore into a headline faster than you could say homewrecker. But none of that mattered to me right then. What mattered was the woman across the table, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug, eyes wide and glassy. Lauren hadn't touched her drink, hadn't looked at me once since I'd tossed my phone onto the table. The screen still lit with that text from Grant. Her lips parted, a shaky breath hissing out. "Chris," she choked, voice small. I can explain." My laugh came out sharp, bitter. "Oh, please." I bit out, fingers digging into the table. "By all means, go ahead. I could use a good story." Her eyes shimmered, lip trembling. "It's not what you think," she whispered. "Really?" I snarled, shoving the phone at her, the words blurring. "Because it looks a hell of a lot like you've been screwing the landlord behind my back. Or am I just misreading that?" She flinched, tears slipping free. The sight of them almost cracked something in me, but the rage held firm, twisting and raw. It just happened," she stammered, voice breaking. I was lonely, and you were always working, and I didn't." "Don't," I snapped, slamming my palm down so hard the mugs rattled. "Don't you dare blame this on me." She choked back a sob, fingers twisting in her sleeves. For a second, I almost pitied her. Then I remembered Grant's voice, that smug chuckle, and the rage flared back twice as hot. "Is that why you've been disappearing every afternoon?" I spat. "All those walks on the beach? Or were you just warming up for him?" Her breath hitched, face crumpling. "Please," she whispered, voice raw. "Please, Chris, I never meant to." "Save it," I growled, shoving back from the table. My chair scraped loud, sharp enough to make her flinch. "You want to beg? Do it to someone who cares." I stormed out, her broken sobs chasing me down the hall, the door slamming behind me. I spent the next hour driving with no destination, just trying to breathe, to think. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, heard that sickly sweet voice whispering, "It just happened." Eventually, I pulled over by the pier, hands shaking, heart thundering in my ears. I barely noticed when my phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with a name that made my blood run cold. Grant. I stared at it, breath catching. For a second, all I could do was watch the screen, bile rising. Then I swiped to answer, voice a snarl. "What the hell do you want?" "Chris." Grant started, voice too smooth, too steady. "Look, man, I know what you must be thinking, but this is all a huge misunderstanding." I barked, a laugh bitter and raw. "Oh, really?" I sneered. "You misunderstood my wife's clothes off, that it?" He sighed, heavy and patronizing, like I was some kid throwing a tantrum. "Look, I get it," he said, tone soft, like he was talking someone off a ledge. "Emotions are running high, but why don't we meet up? Talk this out like adults." My grip tightened, knuckles white. "So you can what? Feed me more lies?" I spat. "I just think we owe it to ourselves to clear the air," he said, too calm, too damn sure of himself. "No need to let this get messy." I gritted my teeth, chest tight with rage and disgust. But then an idea slipped in, sharp and cold. "Fine," I bit out. The pier. 1 hour. Mike was already waiting when I pulled up, his truck parked at the end of the lot. He leaned against the hood, arms crossed, eyes hard. "Sure you want to do this?" he asked as I approached, one brow raised. "Could just toss him in the ocean. Call it a day." "Tempting?" I muttered, tugging the tiny recorder from my pocket. "But I want to hear him choke on his own lies first." Mike snorted, lips twitching. "You're a cold bastard, you know that?" I shrugged, throat tight. "He started it." Grant strolled up 10 minutes late. That cocky smirk in place like this was just another day at the office. I bit down hard, tasting copper. "Chris," he greeted, hands up, all false smiles and easy charm. "Look, man, I get it. Emotions are high, you're hurt. Cut the crap." I snapped, arms crossed. "Start talking." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "All right, fine," he muttered, voice lowering. "Yeah, Lauren and it happened. But she came to me, man. She was miserable, lonely." "Keep talking," I growled, stepping closer. The recorder was in my pocket, mic live, every filthy word caught. Grant smirked, shrugging. Hey, I didn't go looking for it, he chuckled. But when a woman's that desperate, who am I to say no? Something in me snapped. I lunged, fists slamming into his chest, driving him back into the railing. He barked a laugh, eyes glinting, but there was a flicker of fear there too. Touchy, he wheezed, smirk faltering. Guess she didn't tell you the best part, huh? I froze, breath catching. What? I bit out. He grinned, teeth white and sharp. She wasn't the first, he chuckled. Hell, I've been running this game for years. All those lonely housewives, all those girls' weekends. Easiest damn marks in the world. My breath came short, rage blurring my vision. He was still laughing, that smug, oily sound that made my skin crawl. You son of a... Easy, Mike muttered, clapping a hand on my shoulder. Grip tight. We got what we need. I stared at him, chest heaving, fingers twitching for Grant's throat. But then I caught the glint in Mike's eyes, that grim, knowing smile. And suddenly I understood. The recorder, the confession. The smirk slid off Grant's face, eyes narrowing. What? I pulled the recorder from my pocket, thumb brushing the replay button. His voice crackled to life, smug and venomous. She wasn't the first. Hell, I've been running this game for years. His face drained white, mouth parting. You! Gotcha! I snarled, voice low and cold. He lunged, wild-eyed, but Mike was faster, shoving him back. I stared down at him, chest tight, rage pulsing hot and raw. This isn't over, Grant hissed, eyes darting. You think anyone'll believe you? I'll bury you. Oh, I think they'll believe me. I bit out, shoving the recorder in his face. And when they do, you'll wish you'd never laid eyes on my wife. I turned on my heel, Mike following, Grant's curses echoing behind us. As I climbed into the truck, breath shaky, hands trembling, one thought blazed through the haze of rage and betrayal. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was justice. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Grant's face. That smirk slipping, the flash of panic when he realized he'd been played. I could still hear his voice, slick and smug, echoing through my skull. She wasn't the first. By dawn, I was up, pacing the kitchen, nerves raw and frayed. Lauren's phone buzzed on the counter, lighting up with a string of missed calls from Grant. I stared at it, teeth grinding. Every nerve in my body screamed to smash it, chuck it into the ocean, something. But I forced myself to turn away, chest tight. She didn't come down until almost 9, barefoot in one of my old t-shirts, eyes red and puffy. She paused in the doorway, fingers twisting the hem, gaze flicking from me to the phone and back. Chris, she started, voice hoarse. Save it, I snapped, slamming a mug down on the counter. Coffee sloshed over the rim, dark and bitter. You've said enough. Her lip trembled, a tear slipping free. Please, she whispered. Please, can we just talk? About what? I growled, whirling on her. About how you lied to my face for months. Or how you let that scumbag make a fool of me. She flinched, tears spilling, but I didn't stop. Couldn't. The rage was too raw, too deep, clawing up my throat. I loved you. I bit out, voice cracking. I would have done anything for you. And you threw it all away for what? Some sleazy vacation fling? Her breath hitched, hands flying to cover her mouth, a sob breaking free. But I couldn't bring myself to care. Get out! I snarled, voice low and tight. She froze, eyes wide and pleading. What? I said get out. I snapped, pointing to the door. Go cry to your boyfriend if you want. But I'm done. She stared at me, face crumpling, tears streaming. For a second I thought she'd argue. But then she turned, shoulders shaking, and stumbled out, the door slamming behind her. I sank onto a chair, head in my hands, chest hollow and raw. The house was too quiet, her sobs still ringing in my ears, every corner heavy with her scent, her laugh, every lie she'd told. For a long time I just sat there, shaking. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed Mike, voice rough. "It's done," I rasped. "Send the files." Within an hour, every gossip blog and local news site had it. Local business owner exposed in affair scandal. The photos, the texts, Grant's smug confession. All of it, splashed across the internet. Every dirty detail dragged into the light. By noon, Grant's wife had served him with divorce papers. By 2, his boss had dropped by to discuss his future with the company. And by 5, his neighbors were out on their lawns, watching as the sheriff's car rolled up, sirens wailing. I watched it all unfold from Mike's living room, fingers wrapped tight around a glass of bourbon, throat raw. The others were there too, huddled around the TV, eyes sharp and grim. Brad snorted, shaking his head. "Look at him," he muttered, lip curling as Grant was hauled out in cuffs, face pale and eyes wide. "Cocky bastard doesn't look so smug now." Mike leaned back, smirk dark. "Guess he should have stuck to real estate," he drawled. "Not screwing other guys' wives." A few bitter laughs echoed, but I couldn't bring myself to smile. Even as the camera panned to Grant's wife, face set and cold, I felt nothing but that hollow ache in my chest, raw and endless. I got the call that night just after midnight. I almost didn't answer, fingers twitching over the screen. But then I swiped, breath shallow. "Chris?" Lauren choked, voice thick and hoarse. "Please, I'm so sorry. I screwed up, I know I did. But we can fix this, can't we?" My laugh came out broken, bitter. "Fix this?" I rasped. "Lauren, you blew up our whole damn life for a few rolls in the sheets. There's no fixing that." "Please," she sobbed, breath hitching. "Please, I love you. I can't lose you." A lump clawed up my throat, every muscle taut. But I forced the words out, voice cold and steady. "You already did." I bit out, hanging up. I dropped the phone, hands shaking, vision blurred. Her sobs still echoed, each one a knife between my ribs, twisting and raw. But I forced myself to stand, legs unsteady, the house too quiet, too dark. By morning I was packed. The rental keys were on the counter, the car idling, the ocean roaring beyond the dunes. I didn't look back as I pulled away, the sun bleeding over the horizon, that cottage shrinking in the rearview mirror. The divorce was quick, quiet. Lauren didn't fight it, eyes hollow and rimmed red, hands twisting in her lap. The judge's voice was a dull hum, papers rustling, my signature slashing across the lines. When it was over, she stopped me in the hall, voice small and shaky. "Chris," she breathed, fingers brushing my sleeve. I'm so sorry."
Ist der daher? Tjest tight.
"Me too," I muttered, pulling free. Her breath caught, eyes glistening. But I didn't stop, couldn't. The door slammed behind me, the sound final and raw. It took weeks for the whispers to die down, for Grant's name to fade from the headlines. By then, he was long gone, his business in ruins, his wife and half the county gunning for every cent he had left. The others moved on, too. Brad patched things up with his wife, Tony didn't. Peter sold his house, started fresh. Only Mike stuck around, keeping in touch, his grin sharp and bitter. "Hell of a summer," he drawled one night, beer in hand, eyes glinting. I snorted, shaking my head. "You could say that." For a while we just sat there, watching the waves. The sun dipped low, sea and sky bleeding red and gold. I took a breath, salt and regret thick on my tongue. "Think you'll ever forgive her?" Mike asked, voice low. I stared out at the water, jaw tight. Lauren's face flickered behind my eyes. That soft smile, those bright eyes, every whispered lie. "I don't know," I muttered, voice raw. "Maybe someday." But for now the wound was too fresh, too deep. Mike grunted, tipping his bottle. "Well," he drawled, "here's to someday." The glass clinked dull, the sun sinking, shadows stretching long. I closed my eyes, breath shaky, the waves roaring, endless and raw. And maybe, just maybe, I let the tide carry a little of the pain away.